They're a very simple sling. It's basically 1.25 inch straps. Well, I shouldn't call it very simple because there is some complications to it. But the cutting of the parts is simple. Now it's got these two brass hooks on them. They've got these double clawed hooks that they're referred to as frogs on the slings. It's got two keeper loops, one there and one underneath here. And then it's got this D-ring that's in here. That's 1.25 inch inside diameter. They're hard to find something, but I've got a way that I kind of make the hardware for it I'll talk about in a little bit. But anyway, they're very popular slings, as I said, with competitive shooters and so on, because there is a way that you can use this sling and put your arm through it and wrap it around your arm, and it braces the rifle against your shoulder pretty much. It braces you with your upper arm and locks it all into your upper body. So you're using those larger muscles of your upper body to brace it, as opposed to trying to use your hand and wrist and forearm to hold up the weight of the rifle. But we're going to go ahead and get right on into what the parts are on this particular style of sling. Now, as I said, it's basically 1.25 inch straps. I've got one piece here that'll be for the keeper loops. I need this to be 3/4 inch and about 5 ounce leather, 4 to 5 ounce leather. This is 1 inch wide, so I need to cut it down. I'll just use my strap cutter, which I've used to cut the other pieces out already. And I've got it set to 3/4 inch, and I'll just use it to knock this piece down because I just went and found something out of the scrap bin that'll do the job. Alright, and now that's a 3/4 inch piece. That's more than enough for making 2 keepers. Now, these pieces, 1.25 inch straps, and what I'm going to need out of these are 2 straps. The one longer strap of this sling is 46 inches long, and it has a hook on one end, and the other end is just rounded off or squared off. The other strap needs to be 24 inches long total when it's done. It has a hook on one end, but the other end is folded over that ring. And so you need enough extra to fold over that ring and it still be 24 inches long. So I'm going to make it about 26.5 inches long. To give me 2 inches to fold back, and about a 1/2 inch gets eaten up in that fold itself. So that'll be the next step, is cutting these straps down to size. Alright, there is one piece that is 46 inches long. We need our 26.5. And all I'm doing is, this is the strap that's going to have one end folded over to hold the ring. And the other end will have the hook on the end of it. Now for where I put the hooks on the end of them, all I really do is take the corners off a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and bevel all the edges and round them out. On the side where I'm going to be putting the ring, that's a little bit more complicated. So we're going to go back about 2.25 inches. Remember I left 2.5 on there. I'm going to lose about 1/4 of it in there and kind of split the difference on that half that's going to be folded around. I'm going to make a mark on each side. Then I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch hole punch. I'm going to put it where I'm just catching a little bit of that edge, maybe 1/8 inch of it, centered right up on that mark I just made. And just take a couple little spots out of it. So then when I put the ring in, instead of being a tight fit right down through the middle of the ring, it has a spot that it sort of falls into. That also loosens the whole thing up enough that the other piece can slide through that ring too. Now, while we're on the subject of finishing off this end of it, I'm going to clip the corners on this as well. That'll just keep them from fluffing out over time and causing trouble. And I'm also going to take and skive the end down a little bit, which is not, I think, something that was in any of the originals I've seen. But I think it makes the strap finish a little bit better, so I go ahead and do it. And then when it folds back and you're going to stitch this later, you'll have a nice even taper and a nice finish to end on your strap. Now, the last pieces I really need to cut are for the keepers. And keepers are pretty simple. They just need to go around 2 layers of this leather. So I just fold the leather in half, wrap the piece around, and again, just sort of make a thumbnail mark. And I'm going to give it a little bit of extra room. Not much, just a sliver, but just enough to make it fit a little bit looser. I can always trim a little bit off later if I decide I made them too loose. Now, as far as the other pieces, the hardware, the black D-ring that I have here, like I said, I haven't found yet a really good source for 1¼ Ds that are only about 3/8 of an inch in their diameter, are inner side opening. Maybe they exist now. I haven't really gone to look because years ago I was doing this before and I was looking for a source of these, and I found out that a 1/0 steel chain, that's 1/0 is how it's usually written out, which I can get bright yellow from a local hardware store. It's already painted. And then I go ahead and brush it and paint it with black paint. So these are the chain links. I just cut every other link. You lose a bunch of links, they go into the recycling. But it's a lot cheaper than buying D-rings, and they're the right size for what I'm doing in this case. The brass belt hooks, the frogs, are something that I got from Tandy Leather. I think they still sell them. I'll have to check. If they do, I'll put a link in the description to these. And it'll be an Amazon affiliate link more than likely, but if not, I'll just find a link for them. Now, one way that these brass hooks differ from the original military hardware is that they only have 2 rivet holes, and the original military hardware had a 3rd one as well. But one kind of, I found, nice thing about these is that the holes in the back of these for the rivets are the same width as where you're going to have your sizing holes for these prongs. So you can kind of use this to make yourself a little template. And I just take a scrap piece of leather. I used to have one laying around here, but I don't know what I did with it. I like a lot of things, so I'll just make myself another one real quick. I just, right in the center of each of those holes, make myself a mark. And then about 1 inch away, make another set. And you want to make sure you're kind of even across the strap on them. Now these might be kind of tight holes for these. It might work a little bit better with a larger hole punch, but I'd rather have them fit too tight than too loose. I can always, again, punch a bigger hole if I need to. So I'm using a number 4 hole punch, which is a, what would that be? A 5/32, I believe, hole punch. Okay, then I've got myself a little template. And we'll use that to mark and punch our holes on these pieces. Now, this is our piece, our shorter piece that has the ring attached to it, and then goes up And you'll see the holes don't go all the way up to the end with the hook on it. Is they had a series of holes that started after the stitching on this, so just a little bit up, and they had 16 sets of holes. And I'll just use this. I'll line up with the last ones I punched, or last ones that I marked, and I'll punch 2 sets at a time. So I'm up to 5. 16 sets of holes. So they almost wind up centered in the strap, because it looks like I've got about 5 1/4 on that side and about 6 inches on this side of it. So they're almost. So let's go ahead and punch those. This strap has 2 different ends as well. The one end, again, like I said, I just clipped the corners. And this end, I'm going to round out. And I'll just use this little plastic template that I've got that has rounded ends on it. Mark it, cut it with my round knife. Now then, on this, the end that's going to have the frog on it, the hook, the claw, whatever you want to call it, is going to have 18 sets of holes, and the other end is only going to have 10 sets of holes that are going to start pretty close to the end, if I remember. You know, you want to leave a little bit, a couple inches, 2 or 3 inches off on it, because you're never going to catch the end of the strap. Again, this is not a super important, it has to be exactly right. So usually I just throw my hand down and say about there, and start marking my 10 holes about there. Yeah, I got that right. The claw end is going to be this side, and this is going to be the feet end. Alright, so yeah, the claw end is going to have 18 sets of holes. If you always punch the side where there's less numbers of holes first, you can go back and double check yourself. If you go ahead and punch 18 holes on the wrong side, you're kind of stuck with a bunch of extra holes. Again, I don't think it'll matter. You're not going to exactly run out of space. You could probably punch holes all the way along the strap, and it'll work just as well. Now then, it's still really rough on the edges, so we're going to need to finish it up some. And for that, we're going to edge bevel absolutely everything except this end that I skived down here, front and back, all the way around. So then we can round out the edges. In this case, I'm probably going to dye it. The originals, I think, were just oiled and finished and left to darken as they aged. But to go with an older rifle, you want a little bit of color, so it's going to be kind of like this one where I'm going to dye it a brown color. There were other variations on that theme. I think some of the ceremonial ones were buff white, other ones were black. But for the most part, I think the issued ones were just oiled leather. We're also going to bevel the pieces that are going to be our keepers. Just the long sides of them, because the other 2 sides are going to be put together. And just kind of front and back. I think earlier I forgot to mention that these straps, what thickness they are. They're about, well, I call them 6 to 7 ounce leather. I just took a thicker piece and split them down. I didn't split them to a particular thickness. But you don't want them really heavy, otherwise they don't fit through all the hardware very well. So to get them to fit through everything, they can't be too thick. Something I do on these, because I think it makes them look better, I don't know if this is something that was part of the original issue ones or not. I have seen it on some and seen not on others. Reproductions of them, I'm not sure. Is I like to put a crease along the edge of all my straps and all my keeper loops. And this just wet it down and take the wing divider and put a line about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. And I just think it makes everything look a lot more finished. And while you've got it wet down, you can go ahead and take your edge slicker to it a little bit. And just kind of smooth out and round those edges a bit right now. We'll go back over them again later with some gum tragacanth to actually stick them down. But for right now, they'll be... And while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and mark these. And punch a couple 1/8 inch holes where that's going to rivet on. Alright, now we're at that inevitable point where we just got to let things dry up a little bit. If you're going to just oil these up, I would say definitely let them dry all the way. If you're going to dye them, you can just let them dry back until they're pretty much the natural color and don't feel wet anymore. But oil, you want them to be as dry as possible, so I usually leave them overnight even before I oil them up. But right now we're still just a little bit too damp to go for the dye, so we're just going to give it a time, take a break, and come back to them when they're all dried up. So I didn't actually get footage of it, but I just used light brown oil dye and Resolene as I normally do for a finish on this. What I'm doing here is I'm actually going over and using, it's called Leather Balm with Atom Wax. And it's a really good product for softening up leather straps. It'll make them more soft and flexible, more pliable. It does have some wax in it, so of course it works also as a bit of a finish. And then I'm going to go over and use gum tragacanth on the edges. And just use a canvas scrap to slick out the edges and polish up the wax from the leather balm. And that'll finish up these straps really nice. So this is a very old plier type stapler that I found somewhere, and I use it when I'm making keepers. It uses really nice heavy staples. Most of the plier staplers I found now, they don't actually use any heavier stapler than like a normal paper staple, and they don't hold up very well. But this uses big wide ones. And it's pretty much just folding the keepers around. And I put 2 staples in it. You can also stitch these together. And speaking of stitching, the next step is to put the ring on the one strap. And for that, I'll just go ahead and hand stitch this rather than use my machine. I'll just punch some holes with the diamond hole chisels. And then just use wax thread to stitch it together. One thing to note that people do wrong a lot of times on stitching things onto straps is that they'll stitch across the strap just straight right behind whatever they're doing, and that's really not the right way to do it. You should stitch with the strap. You should stitch down the sides of it for 1 inch or so on either side, and not connect those 2 sides together, because you don't want perforations to go across the strap. You see it all the time on manufactured belts where they'll just stitch across with a machine. And it tears right there at the stitching is where it's going to wear out. But basically I'm just going to stitch, I'm going to start in the middle of each line of stitching and go back and forth until it all fills in like a saddle stitch. But I'm not actually using 2 needle method. Then I'm going to rivet on each of the hooks, the frogs, just using basic double cap rivets. One note on this is that it will fit better through your rifle sling if you actually take and flatten the rivets again with the back side of the rivet setter.
so they're not domed up as much. And once all that's done, it's just a matter of running everything through the way it needs to be, and that's putting the keepers on, which one keeper will go way up onto the long strap. Then the long strap goes through the ring on the smaller, that's sewn onto the smaller strap, and kind of got to get it turned the right direction. And then that long strap goes through the keeper again. The second keeper goes on it. And then it goes back through that. And that's going to be what actually goes up on the upper sling swivel of the rifle. Because you'll have to pull it out of that keeper and put it back into it after you put it through the sling. And then the clips just kind of click together. First one goes in and then the other one goes right behind it. And I'm sure you can find tons of videos on how to use these slings online. And it's pretty much done in the way I'm going to take it to the customer, but I decided to put it on a rifle real quick just to be able to get some pictures of it and to show kind of how it goes on. As I said before, the upper sling swivel, the forearm swivel, you just pull it out of the keeper, put it back in through the sling swivel and then back through the keeper. And then the lower one, you have to actually get that clip to go through the sling swivel, and that's where you want those rivets to be smashed flat. I didn't do it here, and that's actually just a little tricky to get it to go through. So I'll go back and do that before I hand it off to the customer. But once you got it all clipped through, you can just kind of adjust things. Get it the way you want it before you find the right sizing hole to clip those into.